I looked at my husband but saw the black man's eyes. I never believed eyes could haunt someone the way his did. They weren't just dark. They carried stories, pain, and something I couldn't name. The first time I noticed it, I was sitting across from my husband at dinner. He was talking about his day, about work, about things that normally filled our evenings. But that night, when I looked into his eyes, I froze. Because for a split second, they weren't his. They were someone else's. Someone I thought I'd left behind. Someone I shouldn't even be thinking about. The black man's eyes. It didn't make sense. My husband, David, had soft hazel eyes, the kind that used to make me feel safe. But lately, safety felt like a memory. Our marriage had grown quiet, predictable. Almost like two strangers living under the same roof. And then there was him, Marcus. The man who'd helped me one afternoon when my car broke down near the old bookstore downtown. He was kind, calm, and his eyes, they carried a depth I couldn't forget. Ever since that day, I tried to push the thought of him away, but something about his gaze lingered in my mind like an echo that refused to fade. So that night, when I looked at my husband and saw those same eyes, my heart skipped. I blinked, shook my head, tried to tell myself it was exhaustion. A trick of the light maybe. But the more I tried to ignore it, the stronger that strange pull became. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about something deeper, something unexplainable. As if two worlds were slowly overlapping. David noticed my silence and asked if I was okay. I smiled, said I was fine, but my chest felt tight. 'Cause I wasn't fine. I couldn't tell him that I was seeing another man's eyes in his face. I couldn't tell him that every time David touched me, it felt like someone else's presence lingered between us. And I definitely couldn't tell him that I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, certain that someone was watching me from the shadows. Someone with those same dark, unforgettable eyes. That night, when David reached for my hand, I felt a sudden chill. His eyes met mine again. And this time I wasn't sure who was looking back at me. The next morning, everything felt a little off. The sunlight coming through the curtains seemed colder somehow, and David's voice sounded distant, like it was coming from another room even when he stood beside me. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the way he always did. But when his lips touched my skin, I felt that same unsettling chill again. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I just needed rest, or maybe the stress of everything lately was catching up with me. But deep down I knew something was shifting between us, something I couldn't explain. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the coffee mug in front of me, trying to piece together when all of this started. It wasn't just about Marcus or the strange feeling I had. It went further back. To the time when David and I stopped really talking, when our laughter had faded into quiet sighs and half-finished conversations. Somewhere along the way, we became polite strangers sharing a life out of habit. And that's when I met Marcus. Unexpectedly, on a rainy afternoon that still played in my head like a scene I couldn't turn off. I remember standing by my broken-down car, the rain soaking through my coat, when a black truck pulled over. He stepped out, calm and sure of himself, with that quiet strength people rarely have anymore. He introduced himself as Marcus, offered to help, and within minutes had my engine running again. I thanked him, but before he left he looked at me, really looked, and for a brief moment it felt like he could see straight through me. There was something in his eyes, something warm but heavy, as if he carried stories no one had ever heard. I didn't think much of it at first. But after that day, he kept showing up. Not in a strange way, just coincidences. Or at least that's what I told myself. I'd see him at the grocery store, near the park where I walked sometimes, even once outside the cafe where I liked to sit and write. He'd always smile politely, and I'd smile back, pretending it didn't mean anything. But it did. It made me feel seen again, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Still, I never crossed any lines. It wasn't that kind of connection. It was something else. Something unspoken but powerful, like two people who understood each other's silence. Yet lately, since that night at dinner, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe the universe was playing some strange trick on me. Because seeing Marcus's eyes in David's face wasn't just a passing illusion anymore. It was becoming frequent. That evening, when David came home, I studied him quietly as he talked. His gestures were familiar, his smile soft, but every now and then, his expression shifted. Just slightly, and I saw that same deep, soulful look that belonged to Marcus. It made my stomach twist. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. Was I losing my grip on reality? Or was there something connecting the two men? Something I didn't understand? As the night went on, I felt drawn to my phone. I scrolled through my old photos, searching for the one picture I'd taken of Marcus's truck that day. My heart raced when I found it. The license plate, the shape of the headlights, it all looked familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. Because for a second, I could have sworn I'd seen that same truck parked near our street not long ago. Maybe it was a coincidence. Or maybe, just maybe, Marcus had never really disappeared at all. That night sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, my mind trapped in a loop of questions I couldn't answer. The image of Marcus's eyes overlapping with David's face haunted me every time I closed my eyes. I got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, and stood by the window. The neighborhood was silent, except for the faint hum of streetlights. Then through the thin curtain I saw it. A black truck parked across the street. My heart skipped. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was just my imagination, but it was really there. Same shape, same faint dent near the headlight. The one from that rainy afternoon. I stood frozen, clutching the curtain between my fingers, staring until my eyes stung. Part of me wanted to go outside to see if it was really his. But another part whispered that some truths are better left unknown. I waited, breath held, and then just as suddenly as I noticed it, it was gone. I didn't hear the engine, didn't see the headlights turn on. It had simply disappeared. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe exhaustion was making me see things. But unease followed me like a shadow. David seemed distant again, distracted, as if he was carrying a secret of his own. When I asked if something was wrong, he smiled a little too quickly and said everything was fine. But I knew that smile. It was the one he used when he didn't want me to dig deeper. Later that week, I went to meet my friend Clara for coffee. She'd known me for years, long before David and I were married. As I told her about the strange things I'd been feeling lately, she leaned forward, her expression uneasy. "You said his name was Marcus?" she asked carefully. I nodded. "Why?" She hesitated, then said she remembered hearing about a man named Marcus who used to live near the old bookstore. "He was in a bad accident a few years ago," she said softly. "Didn't make it." My stomach dropped. That couldn't be right. I had met him, talked to him, laughed with him, seen him just months ago. When I got home, I couldn't think straight. I opened my laptop and searched his name, scrolling through pages until I found it. An article with a photo of Marcus, smiling that same calm smile I remembered. The date confirmed it. He had died 2 years before I met him. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words, trying to make them mean something else. That night, when David came home, he found me sitting in the dark. He asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain that the man whose eyes I kept seeing in his face wasn't supposed to be alive? And yet somehow his presence still lingered, in our home, in my dreams, and in the look my husband now gave me every time our eyes met. When I finally looked at David that night, he tilted his head slightly, a faint, knowing smile curling at the corner of his mouth. And for a split second, I saw it again, the same depth, the same shadow, the same eyes that had once looked at me through the rain. The days that followed felt like a blur. Everything around me seemed both real and unreal at once. David moved through the house like nothing was wrong, laughing at the TV, asking about dinner, checking emails, but I couldn't stop watching him. The more I looked, the less sure I was of who I was actually seeing. Some days he looked like my husband, the man I'd built a life with. But other times, in fleeting moments when the light shifted or he turned his head just slightly, I saw Marcus. Not just in his eyes now, but in the way he spoke, the way he stood, even the small habits that didn't belong to him. It was like something, or someone, was bleeding through. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, David came in quietly. "You've been distant lately," he said, his tone soft but probing. I looked up, unsure how to respond. Before I could speak, he stepped closer. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked. For a second, the way he looked at me made my chest tighten. It was Marcus's look. That same searching gaze, that quiet intensity. My throat went dry. I dropped the shirt I was holding and stepped back. "David," I whispered. "Where did you get that look?" He frowned. "What look?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My pulse pounded in my ears as I backed away, but he only watched me, confused or pretending to be. I couldn't tell anymore. That night I pretended to sleep, lying still while listening to his breathing beside me. Around midnight I felt movement. I opened my eyes just a little, enough to see him sitting at the edge of the bed, staring into the dark. He wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just staring. His shoulders rose and fell in slow, deep breaths, like someone trying to remember who they were. I stayed still until dawn. The next morning I called Clara. I told her everything. The eyes, the truck, the article, the way David was changing. She listened quietly, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Maybe you didn't meet Marcus," she whispered. "Maybe you met a part of him that never left." I didn't know what that meant, but her words sank deep. That night, I went searching through the old boxes in our attic, desperate to find something that could make sense of what was happening. That's when I found it. A small photo tucked inside one of David's old travel journals. It was a picture of him standing beside a black truck. My breath caught. On the back of the photo in faded ink was a note that said, "For Marcus, thank you for saving my life." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My hands trembled as I stared at the handwriting. David had never told me about anyone named Marcus. And if this was the same man I met, the same man who had supposedly died, then what kind of connection did they have? I heard footsteps behind me and turned quickly. David stood in the doorway, watching me with that same unreadable expression. His eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light, dark, deep and familiar. "What are you doing up here?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but strange. I wanted to speak, to ask the thousand questions burning in my chest, but before I could, he took a slow step closer. The air between us thickened. His gaze didn't waver, and as he reached out a hand toward me, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the man standing in front of me wasn't my husband anymore. I froze where I stood, the attic air heavy with dust and something colder, something that didn't belong. David's hand lingered in the air between us, as if he was waiting for me to move first. The light bulb above flickered, throwing shadows across his face, and for a moment I could see both of them there, David and Marcus, layered over each other like two photographs that wouldn't separate. I took a step back, my heart racing. "Where did you get this?" I whispered, holding up the photo. He looked down at it, his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said quietly. The way he said it made my stomach twist. "What do you mean?" I asked, but he didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted, almost uncertain, as though he was fighting something inside himself. "Marcus saved me years ago," he finally said. "We were in an accident. He didn't make it out." His voice trembled slightly, and for a moment I saw my husband again, fragile and human. But then his tone changed, deeper, steadier. "After that day," he continued, "sometimes I feel like he never really left." His words hit me like a jolt. The air grew still. "What are you saying?" I asked. He rubbed his temples, closing his eyes. "Sometimes I see things, feel things that aren't mine. Memories that don't belong to me." His voice cracked as he looked up again. "And lately, when I look at you, I see him." It was like all the sound drained from the room. The walls felt closer. My mind spun with disbelief, yet deep down, something about it made an eerie kind of sense. The looks, the gestures, the feeling that Marcus was still around. Maybe he was. But how? And why through David? I wanted to believe it was just stress or guilt playing tricks on him. But then David suddenly gasped and stumbled forward, clutching his head. His voice dropped low, almost like someone else's. "He's not gone," he murmured. "He said he needed to find her." My blood ran cold. "Find who?" I whispered. He looked at me, and the way his eyes darkened made my breath catch. "You." The attic light flickered again, and for a split second, I saw Marcus standing there. Not David but Marcus, clear as day. His expression was calm, almost sorrowful. I blinked and it was gone. David was on his knees, breathing heavily, confused. I rushed to him, but a part of me hesitated. I didn't know who I was helping anymore. Over the next few days, everything spiraled. David's behavior became unpredictable. Sometimes he was gentle, loving, the man I married. Other times he was quiet and distant, his gaze locked on me with that same haunting look that wasn't his. I began hearing whispers at night, faint murmurs near the hallway, as if two voices were trying to speak through one body. One evening, I came home to find the living room lights off and David sitting in the dark, staring at the photo I'd found. His voice was low when he spoke. "He's here, isn't he?" I didn't answer. He looked up at me then, eyes full of something that wasn't fear, it was recognition. "He told me there's something you never told me," he said slowly. "Something about that day at the bookstore." My heart pounded so hard I could barely speak. Because there was something I hadn't told him. Something about Marcus's last words before he disappeared that day. Words that now echoed in my mind like a warning I should have listened to. He'd said, "You'll see me again when you need to remember who you really are." And now, standing there with my husband's face shadowed by another man's presence, I finally understood. This wasn't just about him. Marcus's return had something to do with me. The room felt colder than it should have. David sat there, his eyes unfocused, the picture of Marcus trembling in his hand. My pulse raced as I tried to steady my voice. "What do you mean, something about the bookstore?" He looked at me, and for a brief, chilling moment I didn't recognize him. "He said you were there before that day," he whispered. "That you knew him." The words hit me hard. Memories I had buried deep began to surface. Flashes of a bookstore on a gray afternoon, laughter between strangers, and a conversation that had felt far too familiar. I remembered the way Marcus had looked at me that day, the strange recognition in his eyes, as if we'd met before. I had brushed it off then, but now, standing in front of my husband who seemed half possessed by that same man, the truth pressed down on me like a weight I could no longer carry. "I didn't know him," I said, but even as the words left my mouth I knew they weren't true. My hands trembled as I spoke. "I had seen him before years ago. Before you and I met." David's expression darkened, his voice trembling with something between anger and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. I took a breath, my heart aching. Because it didn't make sense then. I met him once at that same bookstore years before the accident. He told me I reminded him of someone he lost. I thought it was nothing, but now I think he meant me. David's breathing quickened. He pressed his hand to his head, groaning as if two voices were fighting inside him. "He won't let go," he muttered. "He keeps saying you belong to him." The words made my stomach twist. I knelt in front of him, tears burning in my eyes. "David, listen to me. You're stronger than this. He's not supposed to be here anymore. You have to let him go." The lights flickered, the air around us humming faintly, and for a terrifying second, I saw Marcus's face flicker over David's. His voice came through low and steady. "I didn't mean to come between you," he said. "But she called me." My breath caught. "I didn't," I whispered. He shook his head slowly. "You did. That day in the rain. You said you wished someone would really see you. And I did." It all came rushing back. The sadness I'd felt that day, the loneliness, the quiet wish that someone could understand the emptiness I couldn't explain. I hadn't realized that wish had found a life of its own. Marcus hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. He'd been drawn to that part of me that never stopped calling for something more. Tears blurred my vision. "You have to let him go," I said again, my voice trembling. "He's not you, David. And I can't lose you." For a long, painful moment, the room was silent except for David's shaking breath. Then slowly he looked at me, his eyes shifting, hazel breaking through the dark. "He's leaving," he whispered. "But he said you'll see him again when it's time." The house grew still. The tension lifted like fog clearing after a storm. David slumped forward, exhausted but himself again. I held him tightly, feeling his warmth return. But as I looked past him toward the window, I froze. Outside, across the street, a faint reflection glimmered in the glass. A man standing near a black truck, smiling faintly before disappearing into the night. The days after that night passed quietly, like the world was slowly remembering how to breathe again. David was different, gentler somehow, as if a weight had finally lifted from him. For the first time in months he looked at me and I saw only him, not anyone else. The dark shadow that had followed us seemed to fade, leaving behind only silence and small moments of peace. Still, sometimes when the house was too quiet or the evening light hit just right, I'd think about Marcus, and about the strange invisible thread that had connected the three of us. We never spoke much about that night again. David only said he didn't remember everything. Just flashes, voices, and a feeling like being pulled in two directions. He said he felt Marcus's pain, his longing, but also his calm when he finally let go. I didn't tell him that I had seen Marcus one last time by the window, that his eyes had held no anger, only understanding. I wanted to keep that moment for myself, a quiet goodbye that didn't need words. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle back into something familiar, but not the same. David and I started talking again, really talking. We'd sit by the porch at sunset, coffee mugs in hand, sharing stories we'd forgotten to tell each other. It was as if facing something unexplainable had reminded us how fragile connection can be, and how important it is to hold on to it before it fades. One evening, as we walked through the park near the bookstore, I paused near the old bench where I'd first met Marcus. The air was warm, and a soft breeze moved through the trees. David noticed I had stopped and slipped his hand into mine. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I think I am." For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move by the street corner, a familiar outline beside a black truck, but when I blinked, it was gone. Still, I didn't feel afraid. I felt thankful. Maybe Marcus had been a part of something I needed to understand. A reflection of loneliness, or a reminder that the connections we form don't always belong to this world alone. Whatever he was, his presence had changed us. It made me see my husband again. Not through the lens of routine or disappointment, but through gratitude. Sometimes it takes losing control of reality to realize what truly anchors us to it. That night, as I lay beside David, listening to his steady breathing, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Life didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt full, alive. The memories of Marcus no longer scared me. They felt like whispers of something unfinished that had finally found peace. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." Outside, the wind picked up softly, brushing against the window like a final goodbye. And for the first time in a long time, I felt both the past and the present settle quietly in their place, letting the story finally rest.